Start here.
Get my.
It's confusing.
Call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Eric?
Here.
Kurt?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Cindy?
Cindy's excused. So now it's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item on the agenda today is we'll entertain a motion for approval of the regular meeting minutes from November 23rd, 2015.
So moved. Second.
Is there anybody who wants to make any changes? Seeing none, we'll consider those approved. Then we'll move to approval or amendments for today's meeting agenda. Is there any amendments that need to be made, or are we good with the way the agenda is presented to us? Okay, we'll continue with the agenda as presented. There's no public hearings, no bid awards. Is there any visitors' views related to today's agenda? Any items on the agenda from the audience? Brian?
14B.
Okay. Anybody else with views related to items on today's agenda? Seeing none. The next item is there any visitors in the audience with views unrelated to any of the items on today's agenda? Okay, seeing no hands going up, we'll move to board, commission, and committee reports. And the first item there, A, is a presentation about the bulkhead loading dock, proposed design, and construction update. And were you going to do that, Kurt, or Glow? I heard Glow was going to.
I think we were going to let Glow do that. I think she could do a much better job at it. My throat's kind of hoarse, too.
Okay.
Hello, Flo Wallen, your harbor master. I think you all have a copy of the plan. Good. Okay. So we're just here before you, just kind of give you a heads up on the schedule. Included in your packet is the design and construction schedule, and we're winding down here. We've had the 95% presentation on the loading dock with cost estimate, and we hope to be coming to you with a bid-ready packet to move forward on this project here in the next, probably by the first meeting in January. So wanting to know if you're good with that, if you want to have a work session to discuss any of it, or if you have any questions for me, or that's about all of my presentation. I don't know. This is just kind of to let you know that we're coming up on being able to provide you with a bid-ready packet. So.
I think after reconsideration on this, I think if this goes out as we go ahead and approve this when the time comes, as a bid-ready document, and then when it comes back, then we can maybe have a work session to consider maybe some of the different options that might be available to us, depending on what the numbers come back as. So I think after the bid comes back, I think. So I think it'd be premature to have it before.
Yeah, we tried to set this up so that the money that we have allocated in the last legislative grant will be probably used up with the base. We're not sure, so we got to kind of go out to bid before we know what those numbers are. And we've structured it so there's a considerable amount of added alternates to bump the cost up. And at that point, we can have that discussion on how far we want to go. So you have it now too.
Bob?
For the public's benefit and for mine too, I've read everything you have here. Are you thinking now that the bid price will come in at or below the amount of money we currently have available without adding to it, or do you have any idea what you're thinking? You add each one of these as additional items. Would you kind of run through that?
Sure. It's funny when we go to open up a bid. I'm always looking at the bottom line. Oh my gosh, what is this project going to cost? The engineer is always looking at the estimate, and he's really thrilled when he hits the estimate spot on.
Right, I understand.
I'm really thrilled when the contractors come in and underbid what he presents. So that being said, it really depends on how hungry people are. If there's enough activity around this neck of the woods to maybe throw it in with another project. We saw that happen at the crane dock where we were anticipating $1 million plus, and it came in at $780,000 because one of the big companies had a big project out in Cake. And so they could swing in, do this, and then carry on in a job in Cake. So it really, that's kind of why we're here today. We never dreamed that we would be able to extend that last grant this far. So,
Let me ask my question a different way. When yourself and the Harbor Board got together and you pared down the project to your best estimate and what you needed, or, as you scoped it out, and I'm sure you came up with what was, what you could do or what you could afford, and you put that together. And then, as I understand it, from what you're saying, is that these are additive items on A, B, C, and D that you're going to put out under the contract.
yes.
And so that we can go back to the base once that contract's out and the bids come back, we can go back to the base if we need to, if we don't have enough money. And at that point, then we have to decide if the bid is over that base, what you're asking for on the base. Then we're going to have to figure out if we're going to fund it, and two, if we have to take it out of reserves or what. Is that correct?
Yeah, we feel like we've done a pretty good job of getting that base in line with the funds that we have available. Of course, that includes the mobilization and demob, which then again, we would probably come to you and say, hey, it's good value to do some of these added alternates if we get the chance to have that discussion. It's up to you, and we'll make a case for it. I feel like we have the money in reserves to do a lot of these, and it's just something we have to really pencil out. Maybe we can get all three, maybe we can only get one.
Does that answer your question, Bob?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions of Glow? Sounds like a good plan to me. We'll just proceed from here. When the bid documents are ready, we'll see what the bids are. Thanks, Glow.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next item on today's agenda is a presentation from Agnew Beck Consulting team. It's about the draft comprehensive plan and draft waterfront master plan. And I think there's some copies of this on the table if anybody's interested over in the audience, the executive summary.
Oh, good job. I'm gonna actually stand up. I'm getting situated.
Is there an option to turn off that one bank of lights?
Yeah, well, Liz is standing by for lights for you.
Okay, we're ready. So we worked a little bit. Good afternoon, Assembly members. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you folks today. As the product of over a year-long effort of working very closely with Borough residents, with you folks, with the Planning Commission and several other boards, the Harbor Board, to develop what we're sharing today is the public hearing drafts of both the comprehensive plan update and the harbor or the waterfront master plan. Can you hear me okay? You got it? Is it working?
Well, it's just live on the radio, so I'm trying to
Okay,
get it.
gotcha.
Come under, is that the direct line?
Maybe you could get it closer. Can you hold it?
Let me just check. This will be the test of the day. If I leap up and put that down.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, thank you. My name's Shelley Wade, and I work for a company called Agnew Beck Consulting. Also with me here today is Chris Beck with Agnew Beck Consulting, and we're part of the team that's been working on this project, again, over the last year plus. We've had a couple of key partners in that process that include a company called Moffitt Nickel that focused predominantly on the waterfront master plan, and then a group called Northern Economics out of Anchorage as well. that focus mostly on the financial considerations component of the waterfront master plan. So maybe just a quick little reminder of why we're here, what this presentation, the purpose of this presentation today. So as noted here, these are the public hearing drafts versions of the reports. And so we very clearly recognize that Assembly members, you folks have not had the opportunity to review the latest drafts, which we literally sent you this morning, like 3 hours ago or 2 hours ago. So recognizing that this is really the opportunity to share with you today a reminder of really the purpose of the comprehensive plan update, and then also in really your role in implementing that and guiding the implementation and our next steps. But then also to share really what we're calling kind of the main themes or the highlights of the plans. And then to, before we do that, to really set the stage for why is this important? Why do this process? Why now in particular is this a really critical process for the community and residents to engage in? And then you, Assembly members, as leaders, community leaders, to really have a good grasp of what's in the plan and to support it as implementation begins. So that's really our purpose today. This is sort of our handoff to you folks to take it and run with it and do great things with it. So we're really excited to be at this point in the process. Again, as we're going to explain after, a very engaging year plus of activities to make sure that we were getting things right. So with that, Chris, if you want to slide us forward a little bit specifically on purpose and process.
Pausing to note the pickled herring contest, which we know is coming up. Very important for certain people in the room.
And which we're really sad that we're going to miss because we're leaving tomorrow. Okay, but we had the great benefit of being here last year. So, to start out, we wanted that first bullet, and we also appreciate that we put a bunch of words on these slides, so I'll try not to read them verbatim, but instead hit the highlights. The first of which is really that role of the comprehensive plan as, number one, this legal requirement, and really the legal status of the comprehensive plan, especially in Alaska. So I would hand the baton over to Chris to just tell us a little bit more about, Chris, what is the precedent set in terms of the legal status of comprehensive plans and the weight that they carry?
And if I'm sitting here, people are able to hear me if I speak loud. So there's an interesting characteristic that almost seems to be contradictory about the reality of a comprehensive plan, and that is, on the one hand, it is a legal requirement of the state. Alaska statutes, AS 29, etc., sets that as a requirement for all municipalities, and it has legal status. It is not something that is just a blurry, broad goals document. It has legal authority, and that authority is relevant in subsequent actions the borough takes. So at the same time, it does not set out highly specific actions. So it's this funny combination. It's required, it's a legal document, it sets precedent for actions the borough may or may not take, but it does not do that in a specific way. So the language by design is general. It's future-oriented. It sets intention. It does not tie the hands in very many cases on the specific actions you could take or the specific constraints placed on a private landowner. It's, we're going on vacation, we're going to have a good time, and we'll be there for a couple of weeks, and we're thinking about a place by the beach. It's not a hotel reservation and a down payment. Just made that up. I'm not sure if that's apt, but you get the spirit of that. So any questions on that? I've stood in front of many bodies trying to capture that distinction. And the final nuance, there's a couple case laws in Alaska that make very clear. You need that. There's if you want to check it out, check out the Lazy Mountain Natsu Borough law that make clear that distinction. I'm done.
So I'm going to make life easier for our radio folks and folks that are listening, and talk right into the microphone. And promise not to sing. Okay. So, so related to Chris's overview of the legal status is also the big question of the Assembly's role and responsibility in not only reviewing but leading the approval process for the comprehensive plan. So outlined in that third bullet, which is a little tough to see, are the potential next steps. So this is an approach that really aligns with what most communities do in terms of their approval process and the different bodies that need to go through some form of review or some kind of a public hearing process to ensure that you've touched on all the key topics and that the document says what you want it to. So what we're sort of proposing, we've worked a little bit with the Borough's core team, and I should mention that Liz, Glow, and Chris Fry, who's not here right now? Okay. Chris Fry and Steve have been kind of our core team or go-to folks throughout this process. So we worked particularly close with them and kind of threw this by a couple of folks last night as a potential set of next steps. So December and January could be the time when the Assembly, Commission, and the Harbor Board really have the time to do that thorough, thoughtful read and review of the public hearing drafts. And then in January and February, these things could happen in parallel. The Harbor Board is meeting to review the Waterfront Master Plan and make their sets of recommendations to the Planning Commission. So that could be in the form of approve with maybe this change or not in the rationale. And then the Commission, the Planning Commission would do the same thing, but conduct potentially a series of public hearing meetings to really discuss any potential key issues, hot topics, or resident concerns about the drafts. Then in March, potentially, the Planning Commission comes back and makes recommendations to the Assembly to either approve or not approve the plans with, again, potentially specific conditions and the rationale for those conditions. So that might be a change from what's in the plans today. Okay, in April and May, potentially, the Assembly would hold some formal hearings, and that would ultimately lead to votes on the plans. So again, it's both the Comprehensive Plan Update and the Waterfront Master Plan. And then in May, and this is really important because there is, if you folks even cracked open the draft version that was available way back in May, that there are about 140 odd pages of stuff there. So, and that stuff is comprised of goals, objectives, and strategies. And so really what needs to happen next is staff, department heads, and working with the Planning Commission and Assembly really need to work together to identify priorities and implementation steps. And we recognize that that's going to take some time. So, and then that last bullet is also highly critical, is providing residents with some regular updates on what's going on with this plan. So in May, potentially what comes out of those team meetings is some work plans that say here are the priorities related to transportation, here are the priorities related to economic development, related to waterfront development, harbor development, and tied to those would be some measurable outcomes. Here's the progress we want to make over the next year or 5 years. That last bullet that says ongoing, it's important because residents are sitting back going, okay, what progress are you guys making on this work plan that you outlined, and how are we doing? And that's equally critical as you as Borough, as residents, apply and look for different funding opportunities, partnering opportunities to make these projects a reality. So Chris, if you want to skip forward to the next slide.
Any questions on that schedule?
I think it's open for conversation. So it's a proposed and could be changed. We'll come back to it at the very end as a reminder. Okay, what can this plan do? So a few things that we wanted to share with you. It has provided and will continue to provide really this opportunity to take not only very thorough but very honest look at the borough's challenges and opportunities. We're going to share some of those with you in just a moment. It's also this critical tool for everyone to set kind of a shared course for future direction. And then that future direction is really set in specific topics, some of which I've already mentioned: land use, economic development, transportation, etc. But really, the ultimate goal and vision for what this plan can do is provide and set a place where today and future generations of Petersburg residents really have the same opportunities that residents of the past have had to have a good life here, make a living, enjoy all those things that have been enjoyed by older generations. So I wanted to highlight this particular slide, take a moment, and to very much thank Rick and Gina from Petersburg High School that really helped me facilitate 2 awesome youth leadership conversations where the youth told us, what are the things that were missing from your high school experience that you think could better prepare you for life after high school? The second question is, what are your plans after you leave? And third, what are the things that could keep you here after you graduate from high school or would bring you back? So we all recognize that potentially you need to leave Petersburg to go get your technical degree or your vocational degree or a certification or whatever it is. But what's the thing that would bring you back here to make your career, to raise your family? So we've incorporated the youth feedback into our broader goals and strategies, but we just really wanted to take a chance or an opportunity to highlight those. Okay, so now to some of the hard stuff related to context, both kind of external and internal, and just kind of a nod to that is that photo to the right there inside Mountain View Manor. So way back a year ago, we had an opportunity to get a tour, and then we actually sat and had dinner with seniors one evening. And you have a growing senior population. So as a context for the new reality as we move forward in Petersburg, to what degree does the plan and strategies really address that aging population? So that's just one example. But before we get into the Petersburg details, this world is changing. And the biggest kind of headline to that in that regard is the state of Alaska's status. It's not news to anybody now. It should be very clear to all of us that the state of Alaska, we are experiencing significant budget declines. And that's to the tune of projected $3.5 billion annual budget deficits. So we all know that's a result of oil production and prices are down, federal spending is declining. And what does that mean? That means all of the good stuff that we've enjoyed for the past 30 plus years and benefited greatly from, that environment and that world is shifting. And what that means is that those projects and programs that we've relied so heavily on the state of Alaska to fund, we're no longer going to be in that position. And so what does that mean in terms of Petersburg and really all Alaskan communities? How can you adapt and shift and adjust as a result of that? So we know Petersburg has definitely enjoyed some of those benefits. Go ahead, Chris. So as I mentioned, Alaskan communities, we're all going to have to pay a larger portion of what we want. So you want a harbor project, you want a transportation project, whatever that is, thinking about new strategies and new opportunities for partnerships or for other mechanisms that are not relying on the state of Alaska and potentially federal funding to make those projects a reality is what needs to happen. So that means becoming economically self-sufficient or more economically self-sufficient. Okay, and then Chris, I don't think we missed one bullet. Yep. So what that means, and we've talked about this a little bit already, is really those strategic decisions that this comprehensive plan sets you up to do. So strategic decisions about public policies and really the investments that are the most affordable, necessary, that really help you sustain the quality of life that you've established in Petersburg. So what's the right balancing point there? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. So to dive even deeper into the Petersburg part, what makes the borough special? What makes Petersburg Borough so special? And this is a word cloud this was actually a question in the community survey. Thank you again to everyone that may have completed that survey in this room today and folks that are listening on the radio. This was a critical part of our public engagement process. We got over 300 responses. That's a really great response rate for that type of survey. It wasn't a short survey, so we appreciate people's thoughtful feedback. So anyway, this was the word cloud is what makes the borough special. The words that are largest were shared the most frequently. So, yes, we've. You could probably go back and find lots of things. Where's Waldo? Okay. So we wanted to really clearly also, in addition to some of the not so great news, wanted to very much highlight all the positives and the good things that are happening in Petersburg Borough today. And those are your tremendous, we've got 2 slides worth of these things, tremendous resources and assets that you've developed over the years. And
And of course, one of those is immediately is your access to rich marine and on-land resources. So that we know as sort of the lifeblood of Petersburg. But then related to that is this whole suite and set of really skilled, energetic folks that have really maximized that access to the rich marine resources and on-land resources to really make a living and build this very diverse seafood industry. And then related again is this set of resilient harbor facilities and related activities. So all very strong contributors to Petersburg Borough's economy. So also and that's a great, we have some of those stars from that photo right here in this room today. Okay, did you guys know I took your picture and you're there? I know. It's a good one. That was Mayfest this last year. So, and related to that first bullet, a compact, really attractive, walkable downtown, and then this access to a tremendous suite of other resources, including your great school, your medical center, the library, trails, and the suite of programs that are offered by different organizations in the community. Again, make this really a quality place to live and visit. And then your thriving cultural traditions, which we are experiencing. I love this time of year. So pickled herring contests. The benefits of, you've definitely enjoyed, and an asset has been the benefits of regular commercial jet service. We know the hydroelectric projects, that low cost of power. And then also this new strengthened asset, this new mechanism is the newly formed borough, fairly new still, a couple years old, that is providing greater capacity to address different opportunities and challenges.
And maybe slightly just elaborating and very briefly on that first bullet, a theme that came out in a lot of our discussions, particularly as the process went on, was the fact that a lot of people have a choice about where they live, and particularly people who are in the commercial fishing industry increasingly don't have to be in Petersburg necessarily to be successful, and part of what keeps those families in the town are those amenities that at times might seem a little bit less than critical to the economic health of the town. But in fact, having that suite of amenities, the yoga class, the dance class, the activities after school, all those things turn around and support the economy. And so finding a way to balance the provision of those with the realities that we've laid out in those other slides is one of the themes of this whole document.
Move ahead. Okay, and I'm not going to go through these in detail, but definitely wanted to acknowledge, and you'll find these in the comprehensive plan update as well, all the good stuff that you've achieved since you wrote the 2000 then City of Petersburg comprehensive plan. So there's that list of topics, some related to harbor facilities, other economic development endeavors, this partnership with PIA on different transportation projects, the award-winning branding exercise that Petersburg Borough did. Yes. Does everybody know that the borough got an award from the Alaska chapter of the American Planning Association for that effort? So that's a quick little snapshot. Housing related, we know that Tlingit Haida subdivision, very successful. And then again, this additional suite, again, just a nod to all of the hard work and investments and resources and partnerships that you've developed, a number of which are tied back to not only the seafood industry, but all of these other components of that create this great quality of life in Petersburg. Okay, so now on to the heart of the plan, which is what do these plans recommend? So after all this context, we've taken all this great information and by sort of main topic, giving you some suggestions for, okay, here's some broad goals and strategies. But it might be important to note before that, where did all this good stuff come from? So how did we get to where we are today? If you want to move forward, Chris, this is very hard to read, but is also in the plan, and you folks have definitely seen this before. We, back in the fall of 2014, really kicked off and developed this robust community engagement process where it was really one of the core goals of the planning process was to make sure that we did beyond a good job. We really extended ourselves and made sure that we employed a number of different mechanisms to really reach out to all folks, including different folks that represent different groups in the community, but also different geographies in the community or in the borough. So this is just kind of that different opportunities that we've provided for community feedback. I think the more impressive list is the next one, which is almost impossible to read, and that was kind of intentional. Only because I'm trying to illustrate really, again, that complexity of the public engagement process, which was a whole suite of things, kind of starting with, we know that there was already a whole lot of information about the borough that we needed to consider, that kind of secondary information from the U.S. Census, Department of Labor, the usual suspects. But that was a small part. What really I wanted to highlight here was these opportunities with the community survey. So we had 359 residents that did the survey, the open houses, the informal kind of listening sessions that we did out at the trees, at the grocery store, went over to the city of Kupernoff, had dinner with those folks, with the city council. Some of you probably stopped by and chatted with us at Glacier Express when we were here in September. Over 20 interviews with one-on-one or on the phone with folks. Radio spots. We had meetings with the planning team. We also had this chance, like I mentioned, with the high school, with the Rotary Club, with the seniors, with PEDC, Municipal Land Selection Committee, and then really in total 5 community visits. So all of this information and the time that you folks took to meet with us individually and time out of your busy lives, we really want to thank you and appreciate that. Without that, this plan wouldn't have been as successful. This process wouldn't have been as successful. And hopefully what we see is the strategies that are recommended are almost or mostly supported by most folks because you've had some input in the process. Okay, so we've organized the plan recommendations by really 4 big themes. So we thought, boy, there's a whole heck of a lot of stuff, but if we were to say what's the the 4 nuggets that you could pull out of this plan, and really everything else falls under these 4 nuggets, it's these 4 things. The first of which is attaining that kind of sweet spot of fiscal sustainability and service provision that, again, achieves that quality of life that you've grown to love, the trails that you've grown to love, the recreation center that you've grown to love, the medical center, all these things. What's the right place of kind of frugality, but then also the ability to continue those services in creative ways. So second is really economically debate, an economic big theme, which is that sustainability and building of local jobs and businesses, and that's by doing a whole host of things that really maximize the skills of everyone here and local resources. Third, kind of land use flavored, is encouraging and guiding growth. And then fourth is encouraging residents and increasing their participation. We heard a lot about, we wish we had a better connection with the borough, better relationship with the assembly or with the planning commission or with whomever. We wish we understood things a little bit better about how the borough works, how processes work, how the budget works. We still don't get it after, the 100-plus page budget report is released. It's still a little bit of a mystery. So this whole big theme is about how can the borough, and working in partnership with residents, create the right tools to increase capacity that way. Okay, on the first big theme of attaining a fiscal service provision sweet spot, there's really kind of 2 main pieces of this, and that's the recognition that, okay, no doubt we still have that looming larger context of decreased state funding and federal funding potentially is to think about and continue to focus, because Petersburg Borough already does a fantastic job of this, is in efficiency and frugality in the provision of public services and facilities. So how can you, again, do that, but at the same time recognize and support that quality of life that is encapsulated by things like the aquatic center, the trails, other services that are provided, that is, in part, an economic engine for the community. And so how do you maintain the things that people really enjoy and love and are, in part, the reason why they live here? Okay, big theme number 2, is the big economic development question, and there's a lot under this umbrella. We actually have 2 slides of stuff here. So the first of which we've talked a little bit about already, and that's this idea of supporting and expanding the seafood industry. And so that includes support to harvesters and processors and other community and service supports. And that, in part, is really captured through the Waterfront Master Plan. And so really investing well and sustaining those harbor facilities is critical. And the second bullet there is harnessing and sharing the skills and success of older generations. We heard a lot about this older generation of Petersburg Borough folks that have so much knowledge and are in some ways already bringing so much to the table to contribute to future generations. But is there a way to do that in a more purposeful way so that we really are connecting older and younger folks a little bit better, so that those younger folks can really learn from those decades of experience that older folks and maybe older retired folks that also have the time and the willingness to contribute. And then that third bullet down, improving access and attractions for small cruise boats, yachts, and independent travelers. So it's the idea of getting, again, that right balance of the type of tourism that Petersburg Borough would like, but also providing that little bit of an economic engine. So that's increasing spending that benefits local businesses by having better access. Related things that came out of the plan was better signage. We heard a lot about people coming to Petersburg. They are on a small cruise ship. They get off boat. The first thing that they do when they walk into Deb's Flower Shop is ask where the bathrooms are at, that kind of stuff. So how can we address that and make that experience a little bit better so folks are willing to spend a little bit more time, go beyond the bathroom, and throw down a few extra dollars for a gift for someone. So, and then related is improving the borough transportation system. So these are really tough topics. So sustaining ferry service, freight and air service, that's going to be an ongoing challenge. So to what degree the borough can work in partnership with other Southeast communities and think of creative ways to address some of those challenges. So we have one more slide of economic development related things, and really this is sort of one big nugget that I wanted to deliver as a finally, and that is that the harbors, I want to emphasize this very clearly and strongly in this succinct statement, which is the harbors are going to have and will continue to be that strong contributor and determinant of how healthy Petersburg economy is. So in that regard, really supporting and seeking out those partnerships and those investments that really sustain and with either improved or new facilities in that harbor is critical. I have a link here, and folks already have it in the executive summary, but there's, if you're interested, we can definitely follow up and look at if folks have a question afterwards about what those high priorities were for the Waterfront Master Plan. And then, Chris, if we want to move along, and take ourselves right into the next kind of big theme, which is a land use related thing of encouraging and guiding growth. You need to speak in the microphone.
Maybe just for novelty, I'll stand up too. So this is a subject that's garnered a fair amount of attention as we work through this process, and we'll hit the highlights here. But the main theme, this notion of encouraging and guiding growth, and this is one of these many topics where it's all about balance. No one in Alaska comes here as a rule because their highest personal priority is more regulations. But at the same time, it's sure obvious when people turn around and say, the guy down the street is ruining my life. Can you, the borough, please do something about that? Finding the balance point between those sentiments is what we've tried to hit on through this process. So this broad notion, make best use of this new and expanded borough boundary. And a number of ways that's done. One of the first ones is something we've heard loud and clear, particularly as you leave Service Area 1 and head south down the road, is the process of getting approvals to use your property can be really slow and costly because of the Army Corps' requirement that all land is deemed wetlands. And so a role the borough might play is to be more of an active advocate on the part of private landowners, working directly with the Corps, perhaps setting up a wetland mitigation bank. So instead of it being an uncertain, costly 6-month, 1-year, 2-year process to put in a driveway or build a house, maybe that could happen in less time because the borough's putting the lien on and partnering with the Army Corps to enable that kind of development. Another one is this notion of a generalized land use plan map. And I think maybe the next slide will unpack that a bit. But I don't think you have to actually open the map, Shelley. I was just going to just talk about the topics. I mean, you could, it'll illustrate it, but I don't think it's really necessary. You can see it.
But folks, it's been wallpaper out here and downstairs for a while. But for folks that aren't familiar, this is what Chris is talking about when he says a generalized land use map. And there's this version that encapsulates McCoff Island. There's also the version that really drills down and takes a look at Service Area 1 in significantly more detail. So if you haven't had the opportunity to take a peek at those, it's not, they're not uncomplex topics. And there is a key that accompanies the waterfront aid that really explains the stuff over to the right. That really explains the details for each of these different categories. So if you're seeing this for the first time, just wanted to note that. Chris, I'm handing you the microphone back.
So I think briefly what might be a way to talk about this generalized land use plan map is to say what it does and what it doesn't. On the what it does is it's really just a broad reference point for future policy decisions by the borough. For example, one of the things that you are able to do, if you have such a plan, if you have such a map, is have influence over decisions made by the state government, the federal government, by native corporations. If you have something that gives a policy framework, you can have a voice at the table when actions take place. Absent that, it's much more difficult. And a number of state legal settlements or case law clarifies that, but it's linked back to having a plan that makes clear that you've gone through a public process, that established a plan that expresses your intent, and it's not just sort of ad hoc and extemporaneous. Another thing is it does help inform the land selection process that you're working your way through. Right now, an opinionated thought is that the state hasn't necessarily offered some of their better properties. A document like this, a plan like this, gives you a reference point for pounding on the table at the legislature or with the Department of Natural Resources and trying to make sure you are offered a reasonable menu of good properties.
So we did see the recent celebratory news.
Yeah.
With the boundary issue with Juneau. Yay!
And heard, incidentally, that Goldbelt is now knocking on the door, and now you'll have some reference point. I mean, obviously you'll be thinking through the specifics, but this is a way to get into that discussion in a more defendable, credible way. It also is a reference point for thinking about infrastructure needs, for service provision, and then finally, and I'll use if, when, and where. If, when, and where there's an interest in guiding the use of private development or the use of mental health trust lands, it's a starting point for that discussion. But then I'll switch into what this map does not do. It is not a zoning. That's always the word, you have to utter that softly. Some places you can't even use the Z word, but it is not a zoning map. It is a broad statement of broad land use intentions. Any actual zoning that could actually impact what a person can do with their property would have to come through a separate and subsequent process that you folks ultimately would have the say on. What the plan does recommend is two things on that subject. One is that the eventual and maybe, may not happen, zoning rules that would come in place be tailored to the realities of different areas. Obviously, in town is different than down the road, is different from across the sound. So different rules in different locations. What it does, though, is say that in experience, we find that large, troublesome projects can arise in places and people wish there was some protection, not against the daily things people do with their property, a home, a small business, but when something large scale comes in that really disrupts life and really reduces property values, people wish that they had some control of that, and the plan recommends setting up a conditional use process that would limit its impact to those large scale projects. And that's the recommendation it makes. But again, that has to come back through you folks before anything like that would be in place. So I think that's it. The other couple of things I'll touch on really quickly, it suggests expanding subdivision authority borough-wide so that in the future you don't end up with subdivisions where the rear lots don't have road access because no engineer looked at or otherwise made sure the subdivision was reasonable. It talks about, in some other categories, addressing housing and how there might be ways to expand the supply and find some new financing options to make more housing available for people who are earning less money. A theme that came out loud and clear that we didn't really pick up early is the importance of protecting rural subsistence activities. Some of that leans towards talking to the Forest Service about some of their activities. And this last one is sort of a theme in all these already mentioned, is to tailor land use policies to reflect differences between different parts of your borough, which, as you all know, now takes in a quite diverse landscape, physical, access-wise, ownership-wise, the way people live their lives. And with that.
And I just, before I deliver on this last big theme, you'll notice that all of these, the themes and then the sub-bullets under those today are still pretty high level. Folks, there's a whole bunch of detail in the 150-page comprehensive plan update, and I just wanted to strongly encourage folks, again, that haven't had the opportunity. And I want to come back at the very end with a schedule to think about how the revised versions get shared with residents in general. But there's a lot of detail, and one example of that I was just thinking of is with seniors, we don't really have anything distinct here that says, you have an aging population and you have a facility that's at capacity or over capacity. And I forget what the wait list was the last time that I checked in with those folks, but there was a wait list, and I think it's been a growing wait list. And so thinking about as we get older, how do we address that issue, and how do we work in partnership with other entities, agencies to really address that aging population? So that's just one, but thinking about, again, and then creative, of course, housing strategies that address that population and our younger generations, as Chris mentioned. So the final sort of big theme is about that idea of engaging residents, citizens, and really doing this capacity building or education that will help residents better understand how the borough functions and really borough processes. So there's potentially and could mitigate some misunderstandings that have happened before or in the future. So an idea for this is really encouraging folks to participate in the decision making and processes, but that in the form of participating on a board or a commission. And I guess there was the recognition when we were here last in September that the borough structure is new. It's only a couple years old. And so folks that live in outlying areas, maybe we've got the city of Kupernoff as one example of they have a body, they have a leadership body that's providing and would like continued engagement with the borough on their concerns. Maybe a structure like that. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with sort of the community council or neighborhood council or kind of structure that could work in smaller pockets outside of Service Area 1, and how to have those groups kind of coalescing and having smaller group conversations that represent really that outlying area needs and concerns, and thinking very strategically and deliberately about how those concerns get voiced back to the borough or back to the assembly. So that was one potential mechanism. The other is related to the second bullet, and I say it explicitly here in terms of how the money, ensuring facts about how the money is collected and spent by the borough are clear and accessible. But that expands, I think, to all processes and just really understanding very clearly in graphic form, or what is the right mechanism for making it more understandable and digestible for folks. So in the comprehensive plan update, we worked really closely with Jody. Thank you, Jody, for all your input, and Liz for your input in developing this kind of complex looking but hopefully understandable borough budget. So what are the ins and what are the outs? And it was a bit of an exercise. So it was a total learning opportunity for us. But hopefully for everyone that was involved and has read it, that you begin to understand the idea of general fund and enterprise funds and where the money comes from and how it's spent, because that was a big topic during our discussions. Okay, so those are the big plan recommendations, and that's in those 4 big themes. And like I said, so much more detail in the plan itself that's going to require these next steps. Chris, if you want to move us forward. Which begins again with and this is just sort of a review of what we looked at a little bit earlier, begins with the process of the Assembly, the Commission, the Harbor Board really reading and reviewing the public hearing drafts. And I was very remiss in not including on this list residents. So we need to get the drafts out there to everyone to review. And I didn't talk with Liz or anyone else exactly about how that could happen, but it seems like it could happen very soon. Like after this meeting today, we could just upload them to the website and they're ready to go. Okay, I got nods from folks. So everybody out there, the plans are going live. So we'll get them up on the website after the Assembly meeting today, so everyone in the borough can start to digest and read them. And then we've got this process potentially of, in January and February, some public hearing opportunities. So if you're a resident, you're listening, you're here in the room today, and you want to come voice your opinion or express a concern about something that's in the draft plans, that would be your opportunity to do that. With theoretically through this process, potentially April or May, that the plans are voted on and approved. So, and then the hard work begins of prioritizing all those good strategies to see what is going to happen first. So I think that is most of what we had to present today. I wanted to finish again by thanking everyone that has participated in the process. And of course, for the core team and the borough leadership, for your guidance in the process. It's not always been easy because there's so much, and this is not inherently not an easy process. Both the comprehensive plan update and the waterfront master plan, because you are literally taking a look at every single component of what makes you a borough, what makes you a community, and there's some intense questions about what's working today, what's missing. And what is the context? How are we fiscally, financially? What does the future look like? So I really appreciate everyone's patience too, as we at different times got things up online and all the good questions that came my way directly to me. Thank you, folks, for your open, honest, and frank opinions about what you'd like to see in the plans. And Chris, you have a comment?
I was just sort of in that spirit and saying thanks, but maybe trying to summarize the spirit of the conversations, I would say, really did converge as time went on. I mean, I'm sure we provoked some discussion or suggested some dumb things, but as the months went on, more and more you had the sense of like either flat out enthusiasm or down to the lower edge of sort of grudging support. And we've tried to come up with a plan. Shelley outlined just now the challenges, big area, many subjects, but also lots of different views. And we'll find out, you'll find out if I'm accurate in saying, but there was a sense of that a lot of common ground, more common ground, particularly around the broad goals. There's always details about how you achieve those. That's what our aim has been, and I think our sense is that we're reaching a point where a lot of people are feeling like that there is a lot of common intention in the borough for what its future might be and the challenges and the opportunities. So we've enjoyed working on all that. It's really been a pleasure to be part of this whole effort.
So any big questions that you guys have for us, having received the plans like 3 hours ago?
I got here.
Yeah.
I bet you did.
Yeah, can I ask a question? And this is the first time I've seen your process of where you want to go from here, and I may change my mind because I haven't had a chance to think this through.
Yeah.
But it seems to me we want public comment, and that's what you've said latter, but it's not on here. Yeah. But yet we have all the boards making decisions before the public comment feeds in. And I may have missed something here, okay? But it seems to me that where our boards, whether it be the Harbor Board, the Planning Commission, or ourselves, for instance,
we need to know what those comments are before we take any, we make any changes and so forth. Am I out of line or am I missing something?
I don't think so. I think that the public hearings part of what is listed here, so if we can talk a little bit more exactly in detail how that process can roll out. But Bob, I think that's why I was feeling, wow, this is very clearly missing from this list, that the Harbor Board meeting and the Planning Commission meeting and even the Assembly meeting, that the public hearing is that opportunity for the public to bring forward your comments, questions, concerns. And if you guys want to also open up a mechanism for receiving comments electronically for folks that don't want to do a verbal public process that way, that seems like a mechanism too. So I think you're right, it's missing and it needs to be incorporated so that the Harbor Board and Planning Commission, Assembly feel like they have an informed view from the public of any concerns that they have.
Is there any way rather than to separate this into 3 or 4 separate parts, because whether you live out the road, off the island, or in town, you only have X amount of time to commit to this. Mm-hmm. In your thought process, is there any way, rather than to come in and for a certain hearing on this and then a hearing on this, that they can make everybody, and I'm just thinking out loud now, that they can do it just once, or we want their comments by all means, but to be able to, be a little bit compromised.
More strategic,
exactly.
And focused. I think it's a great idea, and so maybe.
I'll just leave it to you, but that's my thought, and
The good news is, we can share an opinion, but ultimately, we're finishing our work with you guys with the Planning Commission meeting that we have tomorrow. But we're happy to do a little bit of a debrief and use your thoughts, Bob, and kind of talk with staff about how we can roll this out and make sure that it is what you're saying, this strategic, thoughtful process where there's benefit in having folks from outlying areas and folks that live in Service Area 1 kind of hearing each other's feedback on what are their maybe shared or different concerns with the draft plans. Yep.
And maybe just elaborating slightly, I think the typical process at this point would be to do a more detailed version of that. Chris. That would say, here are the dates for the deadlines on the first round of public comments. To say we're going to schedule public hearings with Harbor Commission, with Planning and Zoning Commission at these dates in February, whenever they are. And then here is the deadline for comments related to those hearings. And you can show up in person, you can mail things in, you can submit comments online, and then the staff, the extensive planning staff, has the responsibility to bring those together and to make a presentation, make that collection of written comments available to the Planning Commission as they begin to sit down and deliberate, adding to that the comments that are made in person. And our guess is that probably the reason it's hearings plural. With the Planning Commission, that probably takes a couple of meetings. And then, again, after they've reached a conclusion, they've documented what they've heard, they present a package to you of the previous comments, their deliberations, their recommendations, and that comes before you as a package. You get to benefit from everything that's come forward. And I like your suggestion, let's make that as efficient as possible. And then you're able to benefit from all that, and then it really repeats. You have a hearing or more where the staff works with you to capture the comments that have come in on the suggested revisions. So the flowers will be probably coming out by the time you're in that final vote.
Thank you.
Which is what the schedule kind of suggests, and in part kind of how this process is enrolled in terms of the public process and that exchange and different opportunities, I think in part could be mirrored closely to what Chris is outlining as a potential process. Did that answer your question, Bob?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Are there any questions or comments?
None for me. Any other? Just a general statement. Thank you both, to you and your team. I can speak for our staff. Agnebeck did a fantastic job on this. We were very, very happy with it. We're talking about more public input, but I'm not sure everybody caught how much public input you've already got to get to this stage. And that's the tough part for staff and for the Assembly, which is at what point do you draw a line and say, we got to finalize this so we can start the next phase and get actual actionable items listed. And that's the tough part. But I think we've done a great job. You guys led us in that, in getting a tremendous amount of public input, and we will add more to it. And thank you again.
And just in case it wasn't clear, because the mention was made that this is the first time you're seeing this draft. This is the public hearing draft. There was the public review draft that was out August.
It was out in May, but folks, there's been a whole series of releases in different stages that included kind of the highlights and snapshots. We called those emerging themes. So there's been a whole series of products that we've released along the way, hopefully making and providing residents, making them feel like you're more informed, but providing you with the tools and the right information to begin to think about what are those things that are priorities for you. So thanks to staff for your patience as we wiggled our way around different deadlines and made sure that we got information out in a clear and concise way.
Okay, thanks for your presentation. If there's no more questions, we'll move on.
Can we take the live one? May I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm a little confused
Up to the mic, please.
the role.
John, could you stay in the mic? And this is the only public comment we'll take on this because there's going to be more meetings in the future.
I'm slightly confused the role between the waterfront master plan and the comprehensive plan. For instance, at Papke's Landing, that's addressed in the waterfront master plan, but it's implied in the draft plans that maybe should be covered on under something like a local improvement district. And so for people who want to contribute ideas and so forth on issues outside of the city area here, such as Papke's, would that be done through the Harbor Board or through the Planning Commission?
Thank you for that question. No, it's so the relationship between the two documents, I think, was your first observation. So the comprehensive plan, as Chris sort of defined it in that very first slide, is the bigger kind of overarching general direction kind of information. The waterfront master plan as really taking out a subset of that and really building on starting to identify priority projects, high priority and medium and low priority projects, including areas outside of the harbor that you're referring to, Papke's, Banana Point. There are others that we've included at a higher level in actually both the comprehensive plan at a high level, but in more detail in the waterfront master plan. So I think that your comments actually can just come really to the planning staff, so they could come to both Liz and Glow, and that your feedback will be incorporated, but could get highlighted. And if it's a specific concern about Papke's or others, that could be discussed at the Harbor Board meeting. So what we've said here is that those discussions, if for some reason it feels like it gets missed at the Harbor Board level, that it could also get elevated in the Planning Commission discussion. But I think the Harbor Board is the right place to start, but potentially first by sharing your comments or your feedback with staff.
And maybe just, I think Bob's point about trying to make this simple and non-duplicative is the right part of the strategy that Shelley's outlining, because there are elements of the comprehensive plan in the land use section that talk about the uses of waterfront property. And maybe some of the things you're bringing out relate to that, but then there is a specific recommendation for an infrastructure improvement in the waterfront plan. So maybe what Bob's saying is, you write one comment and the staff makes sure that the right parties hear it. And you maybe don't have to go to both meetings, but you can be assured that both groups will have heard it. And as Shelley says, it probably ends up ultimately passing through the Planning Commission and onto the Assembly. So trying to make it, the reality is they're two subjects, but they are clearly interrelated.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break, or we'll come back at 1:10 and reconvene the meeting.
Thank you. This will be your first meeting.
approve the application for the gaming permit by the Petersburg Rod and Gun Club.
So moved.
It's been moved by a member, I'm blank here, Jay. And, seconded by member Strand to approve this application. Jay Greger. Got it.
You got there.
Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Okay, it passes 6 in favor, and we're missing one person. Okay, now it's the mayor's report. We're still seeking letters of interest. The borough is seeking letters of interest from borough residents willing to serve on the following boards, commissions until the October 2016 municipal election. There's 2 vacancies on the hospital board and 1 on the planning commission. So put your name in. We need to fill those positions. And letters can be sent to the borough clerk, Debbie Thompson, at the email address for the borough, or box 329. And another bit of good news we got last Friday is the Alaska Supreme Court denies the city and boroughs of Juneau's appeal of the Petersburg borough boundaries on the northern end. So that's been a 2-year process. They have 10 days from the 4th, which when that decision was made, to appeal it. But they'd be appealing it right back to the Supreme Court, and it's a 7-page document that they can put in. So our attorney says it's highly unlikely, and hopefully they don't do it. But I don't think we'll have any chance of getting any leverage there. Another couple things that weren't on the agenda. One thing we need to start thinking about, I know it's a ways off, it's not till September, but we're going to have the Southeast Conference here in September. Not sure of the date, and so that's going to take a lot of organizing, maybe through the chamber and other places. And that's it. Now it's the manager's report.
Well, I'm going to throw her under the bus because she's jumped up and volunteered to help us, but Sally Dwyer came in and offered to help our staff with some of the organization behind that. So thanks, Sally. Power and Light is nearing the end of the major rewrite we have of our emergency action plan. This is a document that's required by FERC on our blind slough hydro. We don't do that. We can't use the power coming off of that. So thanks to Joe and his staff for working with the consultants on getting that done. And thanks to a lot of different people, Power and Light, Public Works, and a whole bunch of local citizens, Matt Briner, Pete and Teresa Litzheim, and Ray and Gladys Olson for our Christmas tree, and all of the process that went into picking it, cutting it, decorating it, moving it and into place. Everybody worked really well together, and again, thanks for everyone for getting that in. It makes a big deal for a lot of folks. Breakfast with Santa is scheduled for Saturday, December 12th at 9 a.m. Whole family is welcome. And the Aquatic Center will be closed from December 13th through the 20th for annual cleaning. We'll be draining the pools, cleaning the tile, and waxing and buffing the upstairs. We will have fitness equipment available downstairs for folks who still want to come in and use the facility. Thanks to Dave Nauman for all of his service over past 5 years. His last day with the borough was November 30th. Helped us a lot in Parks and Rec and a lot of other areas. And I want to thank him and give him best wishes on what he does from now on. We do have our Little League agreement with the borough attorney at this point to do a final revision and just make sure it's all okay. Once they're finished with it, this agreement will go back to Little League for their final review and signature, and then once that's done, we'll bring this to the Assembly for your review and ratification. Again, as a reminder, this is turning over the maintenance of the ball fields to the Little League group to take care of it with some help from our folks as we've downsized some of the staff there. Hopefully this will work out well for everyone. We had some of our police officers go to the manor to meet with the residents up there and introduce themselves, the newer officers, to the residents, and basically kind of walk through some various topics, including scams that are going on that focus on seniors. Sounds like it was appreciated by everyone up there, and we'll continue to try to schedule those type of events up there at the manor. Thanks to the Rotary Group for their annual Christmas party at the Manor. I believe it was this past weekend. hearing good reports that it was well appreciated as well. We had a interesting kind of legal issue from Kelly's. The U.S. Border Patrol and the Bellingham Police Department seized over 6 pounds of processed marijuana being shipped to Petersburg by a Juneau resident. So evidently HIVTARG decided that Petersburg was a good market, and shipment was valued at about $69,000. So thanks to all of the agencies involved in that, including our police officers. We are applying to the Veterans Administration through our PD to have our field training and evaluation program recognized. This allows us to allow veteran recruits the ability to access their GI benefits, GI Bill benefits for that kind of training. So we have to get certified first, and hopefully that will go well. Congratulations to Officer John Dodson. He's one of our newer officers. He completed his field training on the 18th of November. He's also been selected to become the drug recognition expert by the Department of Public Safety. Full funding of the training has been provided by DPS, and this certification will allow John to determine impairment from illegal controlled substances and identify the type of classification of substance. Become increasingly important. We did have an incident at a local facility here with someone drinking a bit much that ended up turning into a fairly serious injury. It's just kind of a shout out to folks, be careful during the holidays. We had to end up citing the bartender for over-serving, and we don't really like doing that, but it was, again, fairly serious injury. And shout out to everyone involved in that industry. Be careful. We don't want to see any more repeats of that if we can. Middle Harbor repair is complete. You may remember this is the damage that was done by the uncruised boat. We should have certificate of completion signed by the engineer shortly, and be able to move forward with billing to the uncruised adventurers for the repairs. We'll see how much of that we collect, and if we need to take legal action, we'll bring that back to the assembly and ask for direction. The Herringer Inn, I think we heard a reference to this. We have royalty in the back of the room here with Glow Wallen, the defending champion. It's the 41st annual Pickled Herring Contest. It's on Wednesday, 12/9 at 7 p.m. at the Sons of Norway. So come watch Gloria Ann defend her title in the honor of the Harbor Department. Got to keep winning, Glow. I mean, the library has 3 new display cases in the foyer. These were funded from a grant from the Rasmussen Foundation and custom made by Joseph Quitzline. We have revamped our early childhood programming lineup at the library. Starting December 1st at 11:15, they will have toddler time Tuesday, story time Wednesday, and open play on Thursday. We continue to try to refine those to match the community and what the library can do with their staffing. The STEAM program, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math, is an after-school program that we continue to have some success with at the library. There's 5 programs planned for December. These are funded by the Petersburg Community Foundation and the Institute for Museum and Library Sciences. And another program the library is providing, and we're trying to continue with funding from as many other sources as we can. We had Sandy meet with the library staff to talk about medical issues and care of visitors to the library as we get into the wintertime, and if and when to call for an ambulance. We're asking Sandy to do this in a lot of different departments and making sure our staff is up to speed on emergency procedures and various stuff. We have public works staff is using ID tags, which is something new to our fire hydrants. This will replace the painted numbers that were on in the past and should make it easier for the staff to maintain when they're cleaning and painting the hydrants, so we're not having to redo that. Hopefully that will work well for everyone. We had, with our little tiny bit of snow we had an opportunity to kind of work through some of the new snow removal equipment. We're having some issues with some of the private roads that we have committed to plow for public safety access, and unfortunately some of those are not in really good shape and they're starting to damage borough equipment. Carl's working through that list right now, and they're going to be sending a letter out to owners of the private roads to encourage maintenance of the roads. Otherwise, we may have to stop snow removal to keep our equipment from being damaged. We had I think I kind of mentioned this earlier, the delivery of the new recycling truck has been delayed. The manufacturer reports that the truck chassis is delivered from International, has an exhaust system conflict with the body, and we're working through the details. Carl is, I should say, trying to make sure that gets here in time to not have any impact, long-term impact on rolling the carts out. But we, at this point, don't have a great update on when that truck will be here. Unless, Carl, you have a closer update.
The truck will be completed on December 17th and ready to ship.
Great.
That's all I know right now. I'm pushing hard to get some information on how the shipping is going to go.
Great. Thank you. Chris Cotter has been working with Reed Brothers Construction to finish out a RAC grant for improvements to the Wilson Creek Campground on the south end of Metcalf. The warm weather has made it possible for the contractor to complete the work this month. The improvements included adding boulders for separation of driving parking areas from the camping areas, as well as installations of new picnic tables and hopefully some fire rings. Kind of depends on how far the money goes. We continue to work with the architect on the remodel of this building. 95% estimates came in higher than we would have liked. So we're going back through the project with the architect, who will be here this week to meet with staff. Planning on working, he'll be meeting with Carl, Joe Nelson, Joe Pertignoli, as well as others of us, to try to make sure, number one, details of the project are as firmed out as we can be so the cost estimates get more accurate. And the second part of that is to see if we can identify places we can continue to save. Last I saw, we had it right. We already had it back down to where we were before, but we're going to keep at this. And as Carl and Joe and friends find things, some of that stuff may add to cost, some of it may reduce cost. It's an older building. One of the things that added to cost, for example, is finding foundation problems that they didn't expect when they started getting farther into it. Apology for the heat. That's another one of those things we're still working through. Is we're having problems with the boiler here, and that has an impact, interesting enough, on backup power and what we're providing for heat in the building. So we're working through those. I put in my report hoping to bring this back to the Assembly in January. I think we're being optimistic, but we'll see. So we'll see as we get through some of the details and work out how that turns out with costs. Jody and Liz have identified approximately 10 borough-owned parcels in Service Area 1 that we are going to consider putting up for sale at a later date. This is part of supporting the funding of this building. In some ways, there are still more steps to work through, including Assembly approval, but we've got department heads that have to weigh in on easements and whether or not there's problems with that property that they're aware of. We've got to get assessor valuation, and P&Z has to weigh in to give approval for any of that to happen. So a lot of work on that, but we're going down that direction. Done for me.
Any questions of the manager on his report today? Okay. One more thing I'd like to add to the mayor's report. There was some conversation earlier about Gold Belt, and you probably already all received an email that they did contact the manager and want to come down and have a meeting sometime earlier in the year with myself and Steve and maybe another assembly member or two, whoever's interested. But if we get more than 4 or 3, then we have to advertise and have a public meeting. And the discussion with them right now has been if they just come down on a Friday in February, early February, then we'll meet with probably Liz and the finance director Jody and Steve, myself, and if anybody else is interested. There's no topics scheduled for the meetings, and I've met with them a couple times in the past, so they're good to work with. They're probably just.
I'd like to be involved if we could. If the timing's right.
Yeah, well,
having some former experience with them.
Okay, I just thought I'd throw that out there and let you know what's updated. I think that's going to be early February, Debbie, wasn't it? First weekend, potentially?
I think we're looking at February 5th right now. I haven't heard back, but
Okay.
that was what they were checking with their members about.
Okay, so that's where that stands right now. Okay, now that moves us to unfinished business, and there's ordinance for third and final reading. It's ordinance 2015-15, an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adjusting the fiscal year 2016 budget for known changes. And I'd entertain a motion to approve that in its third and final reading.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to adopt ordinance 2015-15. Discussion? And that has many different items in it. The sprinkler loan guarantee program, which we've talked about before, the motor pool supplemental budget request, electric department supplemental budget request, South Harbor, Maine, which I see they're starting that on that project today, it looks like, Glow. That's good. And the blue bag collection. I had a question about that at the last meeting, and Carl replied. And the truck will be shipped in December, Carl?
Yes.
So with if we agree to this, then that should end the blue bag collection? Is that the potential plan? And then there's...
Right now I'm not changing the implementation date of the CART program. I'm still shooting for January 18th.
So with this, just reading a little bit of the details on this truck issue, is it going to be bigger than the big truck we have now? Are they going to shorten the frame? Or are we going to have a
It is
truck?
a smaller capacity than the big truck that we have, and we don't have a rear-loading tailgate on this truck, so it will be shorter. It is longer than what we wanted initially. They extended the wheelbase by 20 inches and added 4 cubic yards to the body in order to get past this conflict with the exhaust system.
So I guess that was one of my questions, whether it would maneuver around the streets well.
It won't be as good as what we originally wanted, but it will be better than our large truck that we have now. And the small streets that we have, the dead ends that we need to turn around, we have to do 3-point turns to get around anyway. So while it's not ideal, I think that accepting the larger body and the slightly longer wheelbase is the best solution to getting by this conflict and getting the CART transition rolling.
Okay. Any other discussion on this ordinance in the third reading? Bob?
Just a question, after your memo to us on that and the changes in the truck, are you still fairly, let's say, firm, saying that you can meet the commitments that you had made without adding any more people or even more reducing more hours at the Baylor facility?
Yeah. Certainly. The truck, when it arrives, we'll put it to work, and the CART transition will occur. The plan has been remained the same to pick up recycling and solid waste with existing staff, and that hasn't changed.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of anybody or discussion on this? Well, seeing no more discussion on third reading of ordinance 2015-15, will the clerk please call the roll?
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Nancy? Yes. Mark?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2015-15 passes in its third and final reading. The next item on the agenda is a talk of the Alaska-British Columbia transboundary waters, and Mr. Lynch was going to give a little presentation to us, and we've got some information, and then we'll see if we're going to take any action, like send another letter or something along those lines. Okay, Brian.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly. I'm Brian Lynch. I'm representing myself as a concerned Petersburg resident. I'm also representing the San Beyond Borders. For some of my comments, I may say I or we, and you might want to know who he is. This issue, I'm glad you're bringing this up. This issue has gotten to be very frustrating for a lot of us. there's really pretty much a lack of explanation as to why the administration is not engaged on the requests of virtually every community and fisheries organization and private people in the Southeast Alaska to request a International Joint Commission reference under the Boundary Waters Treaty on this issue. That's the only way you have any teeth to actually enforce either provisions of the Boundary Waters Treaty or come up with any sort of provisions for compensation if there is some sort of a mine disaster on one of the transboundary systems. I think they want to try to. I think the administration is kind of looking at, this is an issue between Alaska and BC. However, there is an international border there, so this is an international issue, whether they want to believe that or not, and it needs to be dealt that way. In fact, you have a number of documents in your packet, and I believe Deb just gave you the actual memorandum of understanding that between Alaska and BC on this issue. There's also a sign-on letter that we're trying to have communities, fishing organizations, tribes, et cetera, sign on. In addition to any individual letters that may be sent by individual entities such as yourself. I do want to thank Mayor and Assembly for your last letter and the consistent engagement in this issue over the last couple of years. Petersburg has been pretty much in the forefront of engaging in this issue since the comment period on the KSM mine on the Unic. Also want to thank you for the last letter that you sent on October. I found it to be refreshingly blunt. And I think one of the asks that we would ask you to do is send off another letter, maybe being even more blunt, to find out exactly why the administration is not engaging on this. Like I said, virtually every community in Southeast Alaska, including tribes, fishing organizations, have requested this action and are not taking action on it. The Memorandum of Understanding is issued could actually do more harm than good in protecting Alaska's rivers. The MOU states that the two sides will cooperate in transboundary issues, including the protection of transboundary waters, but the document is non-binding and technically cannot legally enforce any regulations. In other words, it has no teeth. In fact, absent federal government involvement in this, it can't have any teeth, because under the U.S. Constitution, the state cannot engage in any treaties with a foreign government. So to have any sort of teeth at all, you have to have involvement, whether that's an IJC reference or some other way to enforce any sort of action through the Boundary Waters Treaty. So this is basically just a formal handshake. There is a statement of cooperation that is in draft form, and you have that here. And I just found out that Salmon Beyond Borders, and I haven't seen it yet, has sent their comments to myself and also to the mayor, also in there. So that's in there, but you don't have that in your packet right now. The comment period on that SOC is December 11th, this Friday. And so if you have any comments that you want to send off on that, it has to be in by Friday. This MOU took a lot of us by surprise. I know it took the mayor by surprise on how it was issued. Theoretically, earlier in the year, it was stated that this MOU would not even mention the transboundary rivers, and that was a huge part of it. It also mentioned part of the MOU actually references the statement of cooperation. But the statement of cooperation has not even been finalized yet. Even though we don't think it has any teeth, I think the statement of cooperation is actually is a good thing. It's basically just elaboration on the status quo. But we also feel that this SOC and the MOU should not have been issued prior to seeking federal involvement in this. It should have been a follow-up to that. Our congressional delegation, in particular, our senior senator, Lisa Murkowski, is basically just standing by to have direction from the state to go ahead with an IJC reference. As soon as she gets that, basically she's going to make an appointment with Secretary Kerry and go in there and talk to him about this and try to push for some sort of federal involvement, whatever that may end up being. You know, that would be up to the federal government on this. Anyway, I think it's a good thing that Alaska is paying so much attention to this. Unfortunately, it's been about 9 months now since a group of us met with the Lieutenant Governor on this issue in early February. And he has engaged significantly, I'll have to admit, going to BC and then having the Minister of Mines, BC Minister of Mines and Energy, visit Alaska and talk about this. But I think what has come out of that is far less than what really needs to come out for protection of our transboundary rivers. While this is an environmental issue, mainly for Petersburg and Southeast Alaska, it is an economic issue. We're trying to protect our economic interests, our fishing interests, and this actually, you know, is actually much bigger than just a salmon issue too. That if we have a disaster on any of these systems, it will affect shellfish, bottom fish. You know, it goes on, and it could even affect fisheries out into the Central Gulf. So it has potential to be really disastrous. So anyway, I guess what we would like to ask is for an additional letter from the borough to the governor and lieutenant governor addressing this again, really firmly requesting an explanation as to why they have not engaged in something that is obviously of concern to virtually everybody in Southeast Alaska. Would ask that you agree to also be on the sign-on letter that you do have in your packet. And also, if, you know, like a reach out to other mayors to try to get involvement, and particularly Mayor Becker in Juneau. Unfortunately, it's not Mayor Fisk, but to Mayor Becker, because Otaku does come in right by Juneau and very significant to that community. So those are like 3 asks that we would like to present to you for action on this issue again. Anyway, thank you.
Any questions from Mr. Lynch today by any of the assembly members? I agree with Brian. I think we should draft up another letter. I'd like to be involved in helping with that. The last letter we sent, I don't know if you all read it, what we sent out, but the last sentence in the letter asked the Lieutenant Governor what his actions were going to be, and personally, I never got a response back from the Lieutenant Governor at all. All I got was something from his Barbara Blake. Is that name correct? Yes. Brian, I thought it was, from his staff that's in charge of this, and it just told us of this meeting they had in Juneau the Monday. I was on my way to, I was going to stop there on my way to Anchorage, but the plane didn't let me get there. And then while we were there, found out that they signed this memorandum of understanding before they even took comment on the, you know, on the other document. So I think we should send a letter, and I'll try to get a hold of the mayor, vice mayor, who's mayor now in Juneau, and see if they'll sign on. I'll even call the mayor in Ketchikan and see if they're intending to do this. But so does that sound good with the assembly, Bob?
I agree with sending a letter. I'm not sure I'm the same place, though, that where we are or where you might be. Having some former experience with the State Department on some international issues related to environmental issues, they come at it from a totally different standpoint than what we want to do, because when they get a hold of it, they're going to look at it from where the president is and the other issues related to they're trying to deal with it at a national level. And so what we may want may take a total back seat. I would encourage, I guess from our letter, I would encourage the governor to continue to proceed with whatever we can do, you know, and I agree it's an international issue. Proceed what we can do with what we have, but also encourage him to get involved, you know, or at least have the federal delegation get involved to include the State Department. Well, that was point one. Point two I'd like to get to is that I read the the statement, the SOC on here. I've read the MOU and so on and forth. There are 6 or 7 pages of process in there. I'm not sure it's all necessary, but we're going to agree to shake hands and do this and that. But it's very, very poor on substance, so to speak. I think that Salmon Beyond Borders, there's a section in there, I think it's section 7, where they make some points in there about some specifics that they would like to see. And I think that, if we want a hard-hitting letter, I think we need to go to those points. But I also think there's some other things that we need to talk to, is that there are some of those mines there and some of the chemicals that will come into those streams if there is a breach, that have a devastating effect on downstream. I mean, for way downstream, copper being one of those. It will go all the way, as Brian says, it's going to go all the way to the ocean. There's no question. So I think in our letter, I'd like to see something in there that talks about the sensitivities of those watersheds that we're trying to protect, and we would hope, and we're trying to urge from the governor's standpoint and from the federal standpoint, that we do everything possible with the best science to be able to alleviate future problems. Anyhow, that would be my take on it. I don't know where Brian or Mayor's at, but
So Mayor, thank you for those comments. The first part of it, you don't know exactly where State Department would go on this, but I think Senator Murkowski is on top of this and would definitely explain to the Secretary what the concerns are. And he was briefed on this when he and the President were in Alaska, so he's aware of that right now, the concern that we have. As far as your second comment there, I agree 100% with you that we need to have ongoing baseline or water quality stuff. And your October letter actually had that in there. So, but I definitely agree it should be reiterated that this has to be done. I mean, you see what's going on in Mataku with the Tulsa Chief and the lack of engagement there, and comments like, "Oh, that's not hurting anything." We've had a couple of studies that were pretty, minimal. Really didn't address exactly what the potential is there for some insidious damage. Not this big breach, but like you said, different chemicals coming down there, and we know what those effects are on on aquatic systems, what those effects of those chemicals are and those substances. We just need to have an ongoing water quality monitoring, continuous ongoing water quality monitoring. Yeah. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I just encourage that we don't try to kill the governor's efforts. That we try to push on it. Two-stage approach is really helpful, I think, from my perspective.
Yeah. No, our intent is not to. I think that the SOC is good. It's an expansion of the current status quo, but that's what it is.
Yes.
And that does, as I stated, probably should come in after we're seeking international involvement.
Jay?
In short, I think I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, about sending another letter and joining the sign-on letter. Do we need to make a motion for that, or can we just do that?
I think this is just permission to send another letter, basically. So if maybe we could do it in the form of a motion, and then it's taking official action on it. So I'd entertain a motion to do so. Maybe we should have done that before all this discussion. But
yeah, then I would, Mr. Mayor, I would move that we have you craft another strongly worded letter to the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor's office, and join the sign-on letter that Mr. Lynch provided for us today, if that works for a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion's been made by Member Greger, seconded by Member Castro, to send another letter to the Governor and Lieutenant Governor, and we'll CC it to our delegation in Washington, D.C. as well. And then there, I think we could do like Mr. Lynn was saying, thank him for going, the state for the communication with Canada and getting this statement of cooperation, but ask for something with some more teeth, like maybe get, for sure getting the International Joint Commission to convene, because that's reading through this. It doesn't hold anybody accountable for it. Right. There's no doesn't say who's going to pay for what or what's going to happen. So, and I'd like to ask Mr. Lynn if he'd help with drafting this letter. And
we can do that.
Okay, and maybe we get this out before Friday, the deadline might be for the statement of cooperation. So all those in favor of sending a letter If there's no more discussion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll send another letter and see if it can't hurt. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, on to new business. First item under new business is Resolution 2015-20, a resolution establishing budget policies to provide for sound management of borough funds. I'd entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 2015-20.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Walhooter, seconded by Member Gregor to adopt Resolution 2015-20. Discussion? Nancy?
I have a problem with
The tobacco excise tax paragraph here. I don't think that money should be earmarked for anything except the general fund or possibly an enterprise fund.
That's section G of our
Right.
resolution in front of us today.
Yes.
Jay?
Yeah, kind of echoing what Nancy said, as we were proposing to put this on the ballot last year, we had discussed the potential for earmarking those funds and decided against it. So consequently, here we are sometime later, and I would not support earmarking that for any specific area right now.
Okay, Mr. Lynn?
And I would come at it from the same place for right now, only we don't know where we stand. We don't have any idea from the governor's standpoint right now what kind of funds we're getting. I think we need to maintain some flexibility at this point. And I'd also like to add two other points here. There's the charter. The charter says, and I don't remember this specifically, but that if we borrow any of the enterprise funds borrow funds from the general fund, they have to be paid back.
I believe it's the other way around. Enterprise funds borrowing from the general fund. I mean, the other general fund borrowing from the enterprise fund.
I just looked it up because Bob visited me, and it says if any general funds are used for enterprise fund projects, the amount will be repaid by enterprise activity according to procedures established by ordinance.
Okay. But the reverse is not true.
I looked for the reverse. I could not find it.
I thought
it was in there. I thought maybe we had gotten an opinion from the attorney.
We did.
About that. So
correct.
We might have to check on that.
So my question on that issue is, should that be part of the policy? Okay. Now I'll leave that ferment for just a minute.
Yeah. Let me piece at a time. We did get a ruling from Jim Brennan on borrowing money from an enterprise fund, and he was very specific. In fact, I think it was Sarah said that yes, we can do it, and yes, we have to pay it back with a reasonable. But maybe she misread it just like we did. So we'll have to go back to her.
That is more of a financial policy than a budget policy. And it's also because it's written in the charter, it's already there, spelled out. These budget policies are things that we decide, or the assembly decides each year, and kind of gives guidance to all of the department heads on how to plan the budget.
Yeah. I'm not arguing which place
Sure.
one or the other, but there is a point there. But then the second point I'd like to make on that, right at the end where you talk about, it's under I believe under employee travel, where you say travel by borough employees will be limited to within the state of Alaska. Less essential training certification can only be obtained outside the state. Are you limiting yourself or boxing yourself in a little bit? And the reason I say that is, let's say that, and I'll use some of Carl's people there as an example. Let's say that you have a training program on water quality or water testing and so forth that can only be offered or is offered in, let's say, Seattle, but not here. But we really need it. By this policy, you couldn't send that individual or couldn't do it. I'm just asking, are you boxing yourself in? Or let's put it another way. Let's say that you have an employee that comes to you and says that I'm going to down south someplace. On the way back, there's this training program. It is you're not paying for any travel. You're just paying for the actual the training program itself. Is that would be an advantage to the borough? I'm just asking now. Have you got boxing yourself in way too much here?
Someone have an answer for that, Jody?
I feel like we already do this already. I just put it in there. Again, like there's some certifications that, like Carl's motor pool crew, maybe they can only get in Washington. This would allow them still to do that, and there's special circumstances for everything. So, I don't think so, but Steve, you might.
It says it will
you can take it out. This is up to the assembly. So if you'd like to remove it,
that's about what I was going to. Kurt,
I think the word "unless" here, I think pretty much loosens the ties.
Okay.
I think that leaves you some room for flexibility.
Okay, well, I think the way we should approach this, it sounds like we need a change to section G. There was discussion on a change in the employee travel, but that might have gone away. And then Bob brought up the loan from general fund to enterprise funds or vice versa. Maybe we should have a motion to amend this resolution if the assembly member so desires to eliminate section G, saying that where the money's going to deliberately go, or get earmarked for. Does
Nancy?
that make sense?
Yes.
Nancy, would you like to make a motion on that?
Well, we're amending my original motion then?
What we'll do is amend this resolution before us to take off the earmark, basically, of the 50% going to the medical center, if that's what you desire.
So we're amending to eliminate G, which is an amendment of the original motion. Okay, so move.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
Okay, discussion on the amendment I guess the amendment would state that, it just wouldn't say that we're going to give 50%, wouldn't say just eliminate G.
You can, and just as a observation, it's not just the medical center that we put in there. We wrote medical center and Mountain View Manor. It's basically assisted living, which is currently supported by tax revenue. One of our thoughts was to put half that tobacco tax in the special revenue fund, and then in turn use that to fund the current property tax bill that's going to that we're using. We're using property taxes to help support assisted living. So it's actually kind of a pass-through, but trying to show the public, we're collecting tobacco tax, but we're trying to use it for areas that involve public health and support of some of those areas. It doesn't sound like it's popular, but you get the idea. That was the concept.
Kurt.
If this money did go into the general fund, can't we just take it out of the general fund to pass it through? So
sure, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing today. That's what we're doing today.
So it's not like it's going to go away.
You heard a little bit from the...
Just so the seniors know that we're not eliminating funding.
But to see, you heard earlier from the consultants about the concept of being a lot more transparent and trying to show how money is used. This was in line with that. Was trying to figure out a way to show people, just because we tax cigarettes, we're not taxing it necessarily just to say, okay, we're going to throw it in the general fund, use it however you see fit. It was actually trying to designate, see, this is how some of that money gets used, particularly, and we focused on the hospital and assisted living. The hospital, those of you who've attended that, something's going to have to be done at some point, and they continue to talk to me about what the borough assembly is willing to do. So anyway, you can just delete it, but that was where the concept was coming from.
Nancy, you have
Right,
another
and
comment?
again, my issue is with earmarking it for anything at this point, and especially not something that's not an enterprise fund.
That makes sense. Any other comments?
Well, and as new as I am into this process right here, I'm concerned about this excise tax, and if it were to just kind of fall into the general fund, is it still set aside separately? Do we still know? Oh, so it just goes into a larger fund, and we never know how much money we make due to this excess tax.
You'll know during the budget process, because not exactly that was the 50,000 or 10,000 that was spent, but if it comes out of
I can speak to. We'll know exactly how much we make. Yes, we keep track of that separately. But as far as keeping track of restricting how that money is used, no. This was actually trying to say we would restrict how the tobacco tax is spent.
50%.
Okay, so this is discussion on the amendment for this motion for Resolution 2015-20. So any other discussion on removing G from the resolution? Okay, we'll vote on the this amendment to the motion. Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously, 6-0. Section G of this resolution will be removed, and it won't designate 50% to go to what we're talking about there. So is there any other amendments to the main motion? Any other discussion on the main motion, which is adopting Resolution 2015-20? Will the clerk call the roll?
Bob,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes. Okay, Resolution 2015-20 passes unanimously. Now we're on to a resolution, which is 2015-21, granting preliminary approval for the sale of the Commercial 1 C1 zone portion of parcel 01-006-442, identified as parcel 1. So I'll entertain a motion granting preliminary approval of the sale of this lot.
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Greger for approval of the sale of commercial property. So, discussion?
I have a question.
Okay.
That's nothing more than to offer it at public auction.
Steve, you want to clarify what it says? It just gives us permission to sell it, I believe.
Correct. At this point, unless told otherwise, the plan would be to put it out for public auction. That's how we've done this in the past. The Assembly has the choice in that matter. And what this does is allows us to start the process. We have to get the property surveyed, make sure. Jody, what's the whole process here? Make sure I don't miss something here.
I have it.
Oh, you got it, Debbie. Thank you. Sorry, sorry. Yeah, no, that's okay.
The process is that we survey the property, and then I am to find out the costs, estimated costs of the sale itself, and request that the requester to buy the property give a deposit for those costs prior to moving forward at all. And then if there's a difference, for, talks about it in here in a second. It's for, where is it? Of course I can't find it, I should have highlighted it. Well, it's for all the costs that when you buy a parcel of property, you have to have it recorded, and the cost of the survey, and whatever else is all involved in the purchase of the property itself. So this is just preliminary approval. Doesn't mean that we're going to sell it. Doesn't mean that the Hammer and Wecon who has requested to buy the property is going to be able to buy the property, because if you approve this, it will go up as public auction. You can also decide to not put it to public auction. That's completely up to the Assembly, which would be a direct sale if the sale goes forward.
Under the process, then, we establish a base price, and whatever under the public auction, that establishes the low end of it. Is that my understanding?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
But then if it goes to public auction, the highest bidder gets the property.
Correct.
Right.
So any of the costs of surveying or title search or anything like that, or whatever you have to do for municipally owned property, is included in the
Deposit.
base price?
Well, no, it's not included in the base price. It's actually, we'll be asking Hammer and Wecon to give us a deposit of an estimated cost, not to purchase the property, but to survey it, to do all the title and everything that you talked about ahead of time. They will pay that whether they get to buy the property or not.
Just because they requested it.
Correct.
And that's in,
It's in the ordinance, yes.
and this is an ordinance that, I can't remember if it's been modified to
It
fit
has
the
not
borough
yet.
yet.
It has not yet been modified.
No.
It's on the list.
Is that how it's always?
Mr. Mayor.
I just wanted.
Liz?
I just wanted to add that the deposit is a deposit. So if they're not the winning bidder, they actually get that money
money
returned
back.
to them, right?
Do
Debbie?
they?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not like you're paying for all of it and then thank you very much. You know?
I was
Yeah.
wondering how that was going to be
Thank you.
a fair
Yeah.
deal. Yeah. Okay,
I was
so
almost about
Bob?
ready to remark on that.
Okay, Bob, you have a comment?
I'm got to clarify it now. Then the base price that we set would include the cost of the survey and the other costs associated with that?
I guess that the winner of the purchase of the bid, of the auction, would pay those costs.
In
So-
addition to the
In
price
addition to
In
the.
addition.
of what they pay at
Correct.
auction.
Yes.
Correct.
Got it.
Okay, Kurt, do you have any more comments? No?
It's included. in the price.
I've got a question. Has this been, I mean, I can't remember in the time I've been here doing this. I know we've auctioned lots, but maybe this is the first time somebody requested that you change zoning on a lot.
Well, I got here right after you did. So
It's been 9 years. I can't remember seeing this.
I know that there's been auctions. I don't know about the change in the
I can't remember
zoning,
rezoning.
but that's already been approved and done.
Right.
Rezoning's done.
So that part's done. So now it is commercially zoned, and so
Right.
now we're just looking at the approval for sale. So
At least the portion that we would like to sell is rezoned. The portion that now we actually are going to subdivide as well
Right.
prior to
Correct.
moving forward.
The little
Remember-
section there with the sign on it? Okay.
Exactly.
Have you seen all this?
So is it clear as mud to everybody else?
Absolutely.
It's a fairly involved process.
Okay.
I think, maybe you might remember, we sold some residential lots. I mean, that would be the example of an auction. At this point, that's what we're planning. I mean, that's how traditionally how Petersburg has done that, is through an open auction, rather than selling it to a specific buyer. Make sense?
Yep.
So.
Okay.
So, yeah. So my point is, if the assembly wants to do something different, now would be a really good time to tell us.
That just confused my question there.
Okay.
My question was going to be, right now, we're just going to vote on whether or not we're going to get this ready to sell.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes.
But if there's
We have
interest,
time later then.
Yes, you do.
To determine how we're going to do this.
Correct.
Okay. Let's don't confuse the issue. I'm
Fair
ready
enough.
to vote.
Any other discussion?
wait a minute. Liz is shaking her. I mean,
Liz, you have a comment?
I do. At this time, you're deciding whether this is going to be sold at public auction or directly to the applicant.
Unless
It's in the
make a
resolution.
change to the resolution.
that's
And the resolution can be changed and then approved. So you don't have to say it's going to be a public auction right now.
the current resolution says that.
Yes, it
Correct.
does.
That's what I'm
Yes,
trying to
it
say.
does.
So I keep pointing out is if the assembly wants to sell it any other way, we need to change this and let us know one way or the other.
Let's take a couple minutes to look over this again, and, if that's okay with everybody else, unless your people are ready to vote, because it sounds like the way this resolution is written, and I didn't read it that way, if we approve this resolution like it is, then we're going to sell it directly to the Hammer Recon?
No.
No.
At
Okay.
It's auction.
At
Oh,
auction.
at auction, okay.
At auction.
All right, well,
Yes.
okay. All right, I'm good then.
And we wrote it that way because traditionally that's how Petersburg has disposed of property.
Right.
So we just went with precedent.
Good.
Okay.
Maybe it's something when we rewrite the ordinance, if we want to change it, then
You
keep that in
have
mind.
that
I don't know
right.
if I'll still be here when that happens. But anyway, if there's no more, Kurt?
Just a question. I don't know if this is even ethical to ask, but when we have the purchaser sitting in the audience, would it be out of line to ask them if they feel threatened by an auction, or would they like a direct purchase?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
I mean, is that? I mean, I can't imagine anybody else wanting to buy this piece of property is all I'm getting at. But I think if we want to appear to be fair and transparent, I think we need to go through this process of a bid.
Having an auction.
Having an auction, yeah.
That's my feeling towards it
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Like I say, I don't think anybody else is, intending on doing anything, so
Probably
I think
not.
you're pretty safe.
Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Okay, next item under new business is Petersburg Borough 2016 Capital Improvement Projects List. I'd entertain a motion to approve this list.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Member Greger, seconded by Member Strand to approve the 2016 Capital Improvement Projects List that we will use to send to the legislature. Discussion?
Would you like an explanation from me
Sure.
before we start? Okay. There's two. Assembly, you should have two pieces of paper. One is a short list that's in the landscape format. That's looks kind of like that.
Was that on the desk here?
It should have been in your packet.
Okay, well, I see something similar.
Okay. And what this is was the priority list. In other words, when we send it to anybody, we tend to tell them, here's our priority projects, and then we have a second page that's here's everything else.
Right.
This document has some blanks. Those are projects that have been completed and deleted off the list, which is why you see blanks there. There's no requirement by anybody to designate anything as priority. That's just been, again, precedent that what Petersburg has done. We've said, here's our top 10. That number's, you can give 5, you can give 30 if you want, and there's no requirement. And this does not get entered in the state's capital project list. They don't take priorities. They just have us put projects in. This actually goes out under a separate letter to the governor and to our legislators saying, here's our priority projects, if in fact that's how the Assembly wants to do it. Second page is just a list of all the other projects. The dollar amounts you see in these are somewhat flexible. They're estimates, particularly in areas like funding already secured and estimated project cost. In some places you'll see we have question marks where we don't have a cost. We'll kind of work through that as we enter this into CAPSIS. In some cases we've updated funding already secured with ideas that renovation of the police building is a good example where Jody's run through some different funding scenarios, and we've updated some of those numbers. We kind of do this as a running tab. So back to it, the Assembly can decide how to do this. Traditionally, what we've given the legislature is kind of two pieces of paper with lots of detail. One, which is the priority list of 10 items, give or take, and then here's everything else. And the Assembly can decide what you want to put on that list. Hope I confused you all.
Or change how it's prioritized. Yeah,
Correct.
We've done that in the past.
Right. So again, the first page is the priority, how we've done it in the past, or where it's truly in priority order. Second page is just all of the others not on that list.
And it's good to send them all to the legislature, but, well, it won't really matter this year because of the fiscal situation. But before, when there was money, if they didn't have money in that was being used for libraries, for instance, and it wasn't on the priority list, they would let you know if there was money available, and then you could just take it for like 15 on your list or 20 instead of in the top 10.
Yeah.
So
we will enter every one of these into CAPSIS. There's no cost to that. It's basically CAPSIS being the legislative capital project system. It's an electronic system. We will enter all of these projects in there, and they'll sit out there. We did it last year, even though we knew there was going to be no capital funding. It's the way things are done. We put it out there. If something comes up during the process that somebody wants to give us money, we've got a project in there.
So looking at the list, is there any changes anybody wants to make?
I do have a couple questions. Steve, the last list I see, and I'm looking at our renovation of this building, the last numbers I had seen was what, 6,000 or 6 million plus we had on hand.
Yeah.
How did we get to the 7? I like it, but how did we get to the 7 million?
Well, combination of things, and I'm not even sure that number. You heard me talk earlier about the project cost number. I'm not sure that number's right now. I mean, I'll have to update this again before we finalize CAPSIS. Where the 7 million came from is we were assuming some. One of your budget policies is 50% of the excess in the general fund at the end of the year goes into the property development fund. So you get this every year. As long as our general fund makes money, is not upside down, we add money to that property development fund, and then I'm sitting here making assumptions that the assembly would want to move that money towards this project. There's no nothing that appears here ties the assembly's hands. So if I put 7 million there, that doesn't mean the assembly has to agree to spend 7 million. You can, it's almost like a placeholder. If that makes, we traditionally put that on our paperwork so the state knows, hey, we've got some money ourselves. We're willing to put some money in. We just kind of want you to finish it up. We take credit for money they've given us before. So it's kind of, that's where it comes from.
Any other questions about the list?
Yeah,
Bob?
I just have the second question I had was when Nancy and I and I think Cindy sat in on with the hospital, and when they went through their plan to looking at upgrades and looking at a new building and so forth, they told us at the time that regardless of whether, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy, but regardless of what's done, there are needs there at the hospital. And I can remember a couple of them off the top of my head. One had to do with the electrical system, that because of the upgrade, because of the new equipment they're coming in required a lot more energy than the old stuff, that frankly they had to upgrade it. That was one I remember. Another one I remember was the boiler, that there was no backup boiler for, if the boiler went down for that long-term care, there's no backup and so forth. But I don't see anything in the list at all regarding any of those other, those needs. There were truly needs.
This is all that I asked. Part of the process is we send out a blanket email to all of these people that give projects, including the hospital. The hospital, Liz Woodard asked me to delete everything else on the list and put the 33 million in there for the hospital. So that's
why there's
nothing else in there. We're going on the direction of the hospital.
Kurt,
if I could continue down that road there with Bob, because that's our building. Is there any way we could put in there what we would think the cost of a new boiler or electrical system would be? In case there is a small amount of little money that they want to throw at that project. Is that something that we could ask for?
I really, traditionally we have, the borough has not gotten into that area with the hospital, that we've allowed the hospital to say, here's what they want money for. I'm sure the assembly could do whatever it wants in this area. Again, following instructions from the hospital, who said, delete all those other things, put this number in there. I've got the list that they handed out at the meeting that shows some of the components. The dangerous thing about that is that was not a very very refined list.
Right.
Didn't include contingent. Truly was not a project budget. In fact, the 33 million the hospital asked me to put in here, I would argue, is nowhere near enough. It doesn't include any kind of project design. No contingency. None of the stuff that can boost the cost of a project. But back to it, traditionally we ask and say, what do you want put on the list? What do you want me to bring to the assembly? And that's what I did.
Along those same lines, I'm going back to where Kurt is. The charter, I believe, requires them to have a 6-year plan of maintenance, or maintenance is not the right word, but development of that facility. But we've not seen one.
I've never seen one. That may be what they're working through as part of this. That's an issue. I believe the hospital would is trying to schedule another meeting with the assembly, and would, maybe that's a good topic for going through with them.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion on the list? Or?
No, never mind.
Okay, will the clerk call the roll?
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yep.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Okay, the capital improvements project list is approved as presented.
I'm just going to leave it with these 8 priority thing and not add anything to that priority list then. Is that
That's what we
that's
just
what
voted
I
to do.
understand the vote says. Okay. Make sure.
So, Kelly, do you want to read this letter, or Steve, or Debbie, or do you want me to read it?
Oh.
It was really just for your information.
Okay, it's just information. All right, it's just a letter from the chief about the jail projects and funding, and so. Okay, that brings us to recognition, or there is no items under assembly discussion items. Recognition, any recognition for anyone today? I see there's no, nothing listed. So, any staff? Okay, that moves us to 18. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's over.